You're listening to Love, Guns and Freedom with Luca Zanna on Guerrilla Media Network. Hi everybody, this is Luca Zanna. You're listening to Love, Guns and Freedom on K-Talks 1340 AM and on Guerrilla Media Network. I always said we need three type of friends in life. One is a dentist, one is a gunsmith, and also I believe we need a good attorney. That's why today I want to share with you, my listeners, one of the best attorney that we have in Arizona, Mr. Marc Victor. My opinion is not just an attorney, but is an attorney who believes in freedom. And that makes a difference because, everybody can become an attorney, I believe. I used to be in Italy. I used to study to become an attorney. I almost was there. But the point is, when you become an attorney, you must ask yourself, what is your mission? What is your goal? What you want to do? Just to make a buck? Or maybe you want to also fight for other people's rights. Marc Victor, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, Luca.
Thank you very much. We met each other in life a few years ago when I was trying to pretty much stand up against Mojave County. And there was a federal court that your firm, I was so pleased that decided to accept. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity at least to make some sort of news and to fight for not just my First Amendment, but also for everybody else here in Mojave County. So I met you in the battlefield, as I want to say. And I was very pleased with your firm. Even you didn't work directly with me on the case, but you have one of your attorneys. They were very professional. And I was very pleased. Even, of course, unfortunately, Judge Snow didn't have exactly the same opinion about the First Amendment, but that's another story. Marc, I would like to speak a little bit about you, your background, exactly what you are. I know you're an attorney, but you have some specific areas that you cover as an attorney, and also your past. Before you became an attorney, you are a person. We are all individuals. We all have different backgrounds. I always believe we are part of our past. It's like the past recycling itself, and we transform in something new. But at the end of the day, we are what we were. Question mark, what is exactly your background? Before you decided to become an attorney, what did you do?
Luca, first, let me just say it's been really such a joy being able to represent you and knowing you. There are what I would say, and this is unfortunate, so few people out there who really understand and fight for freedom, and it's like we're all brothers in this fight for freedom. So that's how I consider you, a brother in the fight for freedom, and I'm glad you're on the radio and you're doing your thing, and it just warms my heart. We just need to energize our fellow Americans to get out there and really care about freedom. And it's a difficult fight, and you got to do tough things sometimes. But freedom to me is much more important than money. And I don't mean to say money's not important. It is important. But without your freedom, who cares how much money you have? So we all need to get much more serious about the fight for freedom. And so thanks for everything that you do. In terms of my background, I was in the Marine Corps. Right after high school, I joined the Marine Corps, and a very patriotic guy and pro-America and all that stuff. And slowly but surely, I started realizing that in some ways, I was kind of being sold a bill of goods. I started out, born into a family that was very liberal, Democrat type, and maybe just because I'm somewhat of a rebel, I sort of flocked to the Republican side. But I liked a lot of the things that Ronald Reagan was saying about individual responsibility. But it wasn't long before I came to conclude that this is just talk. I was really attracted. I really took seriously the notion of being in charge of yourself, and it wasn't until I went to law school and met Professor Butler Schaefer that he really challenged me on a lot of things, and I kind of understood really the notion of freedom and what peacefully interacting with other people. So some people call me a radical libertarian, and I guess I accept that, but I don't find it so radical that I might say Luca's in charge of Luca, you're in charge of you, your life, your body, your property, and I'm in charge of me. And I don't find that to be so completely radical. To me, everybody who disagrees with us is radical on that point. So I consider myself first a freedom activist. My firm is, I just hired somebody today, and I spoke a long time about we are pro-freedom at this firm. We fight for freedom. I'm not neutral. I take positions on things. But after a freedom activist, I'm a lawyer. that doesn't mean that I'm less dedicated to my clients or anything. It just means that I take cases and get involved in issues that kind of tickle my fancy, and I like to fight the government, and I like to support peace and freedom and all that stuff, and that's what I do. I got an opportunity to do that as a lawyer, so why not? And I've been the attorney for freedom as long as I've had my own firm.
Perfect, Mark. And just to have more ideas, when your firm is, as you said, you like to also try to help causes that they are connected to freedom. But specifically, what is exactly your area of practice areas? What you do, civil, criminals?
Well, primarily, I'm a bar certified specialist in criminal law. That's what I've been doing for 20 years, is fighting the government where the rubber hits the road, where they're trying to take your freedom and put you in a cage. And so that's been my primary area of focus. In recent years, I've expanded into personal injury law and civil rights because just so many cases of the government out of control that I didn't want to let them sort of pass through my hands. I wanted to be able to help these people. So I have other lawyers here who sort of specialize in that area and know a lot about it. I get involved when these cases go to trial, but on the day-to-day operations, I have other lawyers of my firm. And, but I try to tie everything that I do at my firm into activism for freedom causes. And so that's a huge, I'm not ashamed to say I use my position as an attorney to fight for freedom in all cases.
Perfect. And just to have an idea, because you're located in Arizona, exactly which part of Arizona are you located?
Well, I'm in Chandler, but I do cases throughout the state of Arizona. In recent years, I've started doing cases nationally, and so we've been fortunate in that our reputation has really grown, and I've done cases all over the country, which is really interesting for me because I like to see how other states handle, certain types of crimes. And, everybody thinks there's only one way, the way we do it here. And, the reality is people just need to be thinking outside the box. There are different approaches to solving problems, which is one reason why having a federal government that runs everything is such a bad idea. It makes so much more sense to just devolve power down to much lower levels. I would like to see it below the state level as well. But even at the state level, one state can try something, another state can try something else, and let's just see how it shakes out. It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all like the federal government is always trying to cram down our throats.
Perfect. And by the way, since now I wanted to give a pretty much a general idea of what you do, what you've been doing for all these years, and also your areas of expertise, so people also understand if you're in the state of Arizona, it's especially if you have to face some, I call it dangerous situation. Fighting for your rights sometimes can be dangerous because, you make choices, you try to make political points, and sometimes can be consequences. And I always believe you must at least have a good attorney close like yourself to try to be prepared. You don't want to go into the cave with the lions without any type of protection. I remember there was a case, Mr. Pastor Anderson, that also I had on the show a few weeks ago. You remember the case briefly? Because it was an interesting case that also you won.
Of course, I represented Pastor Anderson, and he was another freedom activist, and everybody's got their issues. His issue was this sort of border patrol type checkpoints, and not even at the border. And so he didn't want to give information. I've represented many activists that go through these freedom checkpoints. And in his case, he just wanted to keep moving and go on his way and didn't want to go to secondary. And, of course, that devolved. A real peaceful guy, Pastor Anderson, got devolved into tased and beat by the police. And so I represented him. It was a very long, drawn-out litigation in Yuma for a long time. Ultimately, we won the case at trial. But it was really, if you look at that case carefully, it was a case study in what's wrong with our country, right from these crazy police dogs that, in my opinion, if a police officer is walking a dog, then that nullifies any rights that you had under the Fourth Amendment. That's about where the state of the law is right now, because if the handler says that the dog alerts, and that could be anything from, in Pastor Anderson's case, they testified it was a change in posture or a change in respiratory pattern, which of course can only be detected by the handler, and then that gives them probable cause to tear your car apart. And of course, in Pastor Anderson's case, they found nothing, but he had a video, and we take these cases pretty far. I've been known and have in the past on many occasions to not only win a trial but also sue the government and collect money from my clients when they're in the wrong.
Exactly, and that was for me a very important case because first of all, Pastor Anderson had the choice. He could have just plead guilty, and I think it was a misdemeanor, if I well remember. I was offered just a fine, for what I understand, a few $100s.
That's right.
Instead, he chose the hard way, I think also the courageous way, to put a lot of money out, because, defending criminally, I mean, when you go in court against the government and you're fighting for your life, it's going to cost you many hours of work, many lawyers. I mean, it's a big team behind. And he chose that way just to make a point that we have rights. We have a Fourth Amendment, regardless now what the federal government's saying, that we have this, the Fourth Amendment free zone, like 100 miles, I guess, from every border.
Right, doesn't even apply. And the Supreme Court has basically said, look, if it happens at the border, it's reasonable. Said another way, there is no Fourth Amendment at the international border. I mean, I think we've been pretty well sold out by the court here. I don't feel like they have kept in line with what the founders of our nation have envisioned for a free society. And indeed, I was just on another radio show today, and I said I think it's. I would love to say we're the land of the free, and we got a lot of songs about it, and we pledge allegiance and all this other stuff. But honestly, if we really sit down and look each other in the eye, and I say, Luca, are we really the land of the free? I think if we're being honest with each other, we got to say no, we're not. We are no longer the land of the free. And I was referencing this Fraser Institute study that looked, because one of the co-hosts on the other show said, hey, we're the freest country. What country's freer than us? He gave me the standard, just patriotic American line. And I pulled out this Fraser Institute study and said, look, according to them, and they did a very detailed, extensive study looking at political freedoms and economic freedoms and giving scores to each and averaging them. The U.S. came in 7th, which is still not terrible. I mean, but we're not the freest country. We incarcerate more people, percentage of our population, than any other country on the face of the earth, and that's just not compatible with a free society.
Exactly, and that's the point. We cannot just say we have a constitution or we have a Bill of Rights, because the Constitution and Bill of Rights, unless there are good people, men and women, willing to sacrifice themselves to defend these rights and stand for these rights, unfortunately, it is who's going to defend the Constitution? Who's going to defend the Bill of Rights? Unless good men and women, they will stand up. And I'm just saying now, in this case, also through the court, because I think that's why it's so important to have good attorneys who believe in freedom, because the first stage where we're going to have our battlefield for freedom is going to be exactly in the courtrooms. And I hope it's going to stay there. That's my goal. We try to keep it civil. And that's why I think, but we still need to have people behind that are ready to sacrifice and also sometimes make choices, because, sometimes I say, okay, I would like to buy a brand new car. Maybe I'm ready to have this money, I have a used car, but being ready to be economically free and independent to fight for our rights. Because the problem is governments always pick people, normally the weakest. And weakest means they have no the opportunities to defend themselves and stand up for their rights. That's why I think it's very important. Sometimes in life we must make choices. And I believe a good attorney when you know your rights and you're ready to stand up, it's the way to go. Now, Mark.
Yeah, and I've got to say, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say I've been, frankly, I've been disappointed in a lot of my fellow lawyers. For example, here's just an example. I've had some other criminal defense lawyers sort of attack me for my position that we ought to end the drug war, simply because, as they've pointed out rather correctly, we make a lot of money off the drug war. And they say, look, I make money, you make money, we all make money off the drug war. If the drug war ends, we're going to make less money. And I say, well, that's true, but don't you think freedom is more important than money? And they're not really convinced on that point. So I've been frustrated by that. I mean, frankly, if somebody said to me, Mark, you got to pick a criminal defense lawyer to represent you, I'd have a very hard time coming up with who I would want. And so I've tried to collect, good lawyers along the way in different areas. And of course, if anybody wants to contact me, I can give them a name of people who I think are what I'd call pretty hardcore into what they do. But overall, I've been pretty disappointed. So going to the court to fight for freedom is okay. I think it's good in the sense that it gets people to think about things. Like, for example, what Dr. Steinmetz did, it's affected public opinion. People are talking about the issue. That's good. But I do not think we are going to ever regain our freedoms in our country or really anywhere until the people who live here start changing their hearts and minds about freedom and start valuing it again. No matter what happens in the court, no matter what the Constitution says, no matter what any judge says, we're never going to regain freedom until people start valuing it again. And just like when the founders of our nation, when they talked about revolution, they weren't really talking about a military exercise. They were talking about a change in thought. And that's what we need. We need people to change the way they think in regards to the government and individuals and start getting a more of appreciation, really tolerance. I mean, need to get to the point where people say, look, even though I don't agree with what my neighbor's doing, I wouldn't do it, I disagree, I may even try to talk my neighbor out of it, I respect his or her right to do that because they're peaceful. Until we can get there, we don't deserve freedom.
Exactly. And talking about Dr. Steinmetz that you just said, I would like to, maybe you can remind in few words exactly what happened, what Dr. Steinmetz did, and then we can a little bit elaborate about exactly some basic gun laws.
Well, Dr. Steinmetz has a PhD and a medical doctorate degree, and he works as a researcher at Barrow's Neurological Institute. And so he's a well-respected guy with no priors. He's a gun enthusiast. He's got a CCW. He's got lots of training. And he wanted to make a political point by taking his AR-15 with the safety on to the unsecured part of the airport where he's absolutely permitted to do that. And so he did exactly that, took his AR-15 to Sky Harbor Airport where he went to Starbucks and ordered a coffee and sat down peacefully in one of the chairs like he was waiting for somebody with his AR-15. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the police didn't appreciate that. And I think maybe they coaxed someone into saying that at some point they were afraid and had the muzzle pointed at them, which I don't believe, and I don't think there's going to be any video to substantiate that. So they wound up arresting him on 2 counts of disorderly conduct with a firearm, which is a very serious felony. It carries mandatory prison.
Wow.
And eventually he was released, and the charges were scratched, which means that they chose not to file a complaint. But I spoke with the elected county attorney, Bill Montgomery, who told me, look, we just haven't made a decision on it yet, which I think is fair. I mean, they need to have an opportunity to review the video, and then they'll make a decision. And so I'm optimistic and certainly hopeful that they're not going to charge him with any felony crimes. And he had a press conference the other day at my law firm. Every TV station here locally in Phoenix showed up, and a lot of the radio stations and the print media as well. And he made a statement about exactly why he did what he did. But the gist of it was a political statement that peaceful people can safely carry AR-15s even to the unsecured portion of the airport without incident.
Exactly. And, this is very important because I'm, first of all, not just an advocate for the Second Amendment, as you can understand from the show, the name of the show, but also I believe that rights are like muscles. If you do not use them, you lose them. Even in the great state of Arizona, we have open carry laws. Even now we have, of course, constitutional carry laws that we can carry concealed without any type of government permit in most of the places. The point is sometimes not exercising our rights. In this case, we're talking about open carry. It may start to create a precedent, especially like a training in the wrong direction for our law enforcement, but more important, I believe, for the general population, people that may be coming from other states or they come from new generation. They forgot that it's legal, it's okay for a law-abiding citizen to carry a weapon. In this case, could be a long weapon or a side weapon like a gun, if holstered or on a sling. That's the most important. In a peaceful way, we have the right to carry a weapon. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, you're the attorney here.
Well, of course, everybody here who's not a prohibited possessor has a right to safely carry a firearm to places that firearms are allowed, and there are lots of places they're not allowed, but Sky Harbor Airport, at least the unsecured portion of it, is one of those places where you're allowed to carry a firearm. And it doesn't make a distinction between handguns and AR-15s. It just turns out that, those of us in the gun community, we know an AR-15 really isn't any more dangerous than any other handgun. And it's not an assault rifle because an assault is a type of conduct, and rifles are just pieces of metal. They just lay there. So it's more about the nature of the person who is carrying the firearm than it is about the actual firearm. And I think that Dr. Steinmetz was just really trying to make that point. So Our position is that he had and I think nobody disagrees that he had every right to take his AR-15 to Sky Harbor Airport to make a political statement. Whether it was wise or not for him to do that is a completely different question. And the only factual point of contention is whether or not he ever pointed the rifle at any person.
Exactly. And if, in my little experience as I don't want to call it activist, but person that we've been doing this, we call it the Thomas Jefferson Walk. We organized it a few years ago. We walk in the park. I'm talking about walking with rifles, peacefully, families, older, youngers, and just we do a Sunday event. Thomas Jefferson always advises to his, I think it was his nephew anyway, like walk with your gun. It's a good sport. It's not like a violent sport. So we walk with our rifles in Kingman and Mojave County here. And the point is, when we do these events, we try to retrain our law enforcement, peace officers, supposed to be. More important, we bring video cameras. And, I'm not going to here to try to give advices, but if I would have done something like that to make a political statement, I would at least have a couple of friends with video cameras behind me to be sure that nobody can distort the message of a political statement that I'm sure and I hope Dr. Steinmetz was trying to do. Mark.
Well, certainly,
yes.
Speaking as an activist, things could have been done differently. And had I been advised about this before he did it, I certainly would have taken a different action to document exactly what he did and maybe put people on notice and
exactly.
Those types of things. But, activism is one of those things that everybody does what they're comfortable with when they're comfortable with it.
And we live and learn. We are humans. Sometimes we make mistakes. More important thing that nobody got hurt. Important thing that it was just a political statement. Now, Mark, if people want to reach you, please give us a phone number, website, everywhere they can reach you.
I'm super easy to reach just through my website, which is just attorneyforfreedom.com. What else could it be, right? In terms of reaching my law firm, the main line is 480-455-5233. And it's probably important to note that people sometimes ask me if they could come here, put money in my trust account just in case anything happens, and I always tell them no. I always tell people I will talk to anybody 24/7, 365. If you call my firm, there's always be a button about if it's an emergency, and if you hit that, it'll go right to my cell phone, and I'll be happy to talk to you, even without a dime. If you got an emergency, you can call me anytime on any day. That includes Christmas Day, New Year's Day. I take everybody's call whenever they come in because you just never know what's going on, and somebody's life could be affected in a good or bad way based on the advice they get right there.
Mark, I want to really thank you very much, and I really pray for the Mr. Steinmetz that everything's going to be okay. And more important, I pray that you're going to stay in the fight with us because we need you. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that was Marc Victor, attorney for freedom. As I said, we need good attorneys. Attorneys sometimes we are used to think it's a bad word. Yeah, it can be also a bad word. But I believe when you find a good man who believes in freedom, this man, don't forget, before to be an attorney, used to be a United States Marine. So he has a note to uphold. And that's why I think it's here now, fighting for our freedom in our courtrooms. Stay tuned, don't go away. You're listening to Love, Guns, and Freedom.
He's a songwriter, a poet, a rifleman.
I'm not afraid.
And a constitutional activist.
I'm not afraid.
Italian by birth.
I'm not afraid.
American by choice. Luca Zanna.
I'm not afraid.
And his new CD, Love, Guns, and Freedom. 16 powerful songs on one CD from the heart of a patriot. For download or to order the CD, go to www.lovegunsfreedom.com. That's www.lovegunsfreedom.com. Lyrics for your mind, music for your heart. Luca Zanna's new CD, Love, Guns, and Freedom.